Uh, Chair Eagleson Cheksowich,
Present.
Vice Chair Roman,
Present.
Board Member Heinrich,
Here.
Board Member Wimmer. Here, we have a quorum.
Great. Do we have any agenda changes, additions, deletions?
No changes.
And then do we have any public comment on items not on the agenda?
No public comments.
Okay. So shall we just move on to the scheduled presentation today? Does anybody have, do any board members have disclosures related to this item? Doesn't look like it. Okay. All right. Let's continue. Yeah.
Yes, thank you. Sheldon Ossing, Principal Planner. We've prepared a PowerPoint for you about the draft North Ventura Coordinated Area Plan. And there will be some focus on your purview, which is historic resources. So it's important to understand kind of how we got here today. And it all started with the adoption of the comprehensive plan. There was a policy that said that there should be a coordinated area plan developed for the North Ventura area. And the council initiated that plan, the plan process back in November of 2017. And after that, they did establish some goals and objectives for which the plan would follow, and consultants and staff would also follow. And I'll go over those goals and objectives later in the presentation. The coordinated area plan is a community-based plan, so it's important to have community involvement, and the council did appoint members of the city for a working group, and they met and discussed components of the plan leading to alternatives that were presented to the PTC, and the PTC recommended alternatives to the council for their endorsement of a preferred plan, and that occurred in January 2022. With their endorsement of preferred plan alternative. So since that time, we've been working with our consultant to develop a draft plan. We had some further refinements of that endorsement from the council late last year. And so we're happy that we have a public version of this document out there for you. Along this whole time frame, there have been other projects in that plan area that have been submitted. We call those pipeline projects. Those are projects that are not subject to the plan until it becomes adopted, and then projects afterwards would be subject to the plan. So you're probably familiar with a few of those. So objectives today would be, we're seeking your feedback on this draft document as it relates to historic resources. So as I mentioned, that there's a pretty robust community process. We had community workshops, many working group meetings. We had stakeholder group meetings. We also conducted online surveys. We met with previous decision makers, including the council a few times, Historic Resources Board, Planning Commission, the Parks and Recreation Commission, and the Architectural Review Board. So there are some requirements from the municipal code for coordinated area plans, and these are 6 items that need to be incorporated in the plans. Those are all in the plan. And then there were goals that were adopted from the council, and the draft plan is substantially consistent with. Throughout the document, we did highlight where the plan is consistent with a goal, just to make it easy for people to make those connections. So they include here like housing and land use, all the way through like urban design guidelines, and neighborhood fabric. There are also adopted objectives that the working group, staff, and the consultant followed when preparing the document. So these are some things that we did take into account when we were drafting this plan. Number 6, the California Environmental Equality Act, that's one thing that we're continuing to work on, and we'll have I'll mention later in this presentation, but we'll have a more formal circulation of that document later this summer. So getting to the plan and what we're talking about here, it's 60 acres. It's bounded by Oregon Expressway, Page Mill Road to the north, El Camino Real to the west, Lambert Avenue to the south, and Caltrain rail corridor to the east. There's a lot of mix of uses already. You have established single family neighborhoods. You have El Camino Real, more of a commercial corridor. You do have some industrial, you have some office involved. Some notable sites in the planned area include the Monadero Creek Channel and the buildings associated with the cannery. So with the council endorsed plan, this is a deferred alternative, it does include some highlights here. So the plan over a 20-year period build out, we're looking at 530 dwelling units. We'd expect to have and see greater densities along El Camino Real and Park Boulevard. We'd also, for parking, no minimums or maximums because it's adjacency to the Caltrain station. We're also looking at moving that concrete channel and widening that corridor, as well as adaptive reuse of the cannery building. So the MACAP represents a rare opportunity within the city of Palo Alto to plan proactively for transit-oriented, mixed use, mixed income, and walkable neighborhood. So some components of the plan, we have chapter 1 is describes some of the background about the area. Chapter 2 describes the framework and the vision for the area. Chapters 3 through 6 are really the meat of the document that include the design standards to be applied. That includes public realm and streets, parks and open space, and some building standards. And then chapter 7 is how we would implement this plan. So after the plan gets adopted, these are things that we need to follow or follow up on. We do expect that there'll be a lot of transition in this area from the existing commercials, a lot of commercial that would be reduced. And overall, we have those replaced with more residential. We'd have some new, very limited office spaces, a maximum of 5,000 square feet. And the existing uses that are there would be grandfathered. So as the market would turn over, then we would see the plan's vision come to fruition. So parcels that are currently zoned commercial will become mixed use zoning or residential. As I mentioned, the plan does plan for 530 additional units at build out. So regarding now getting some of the historic resources more your focus, the NVCAP does support the adaptive reuse of the cannery building, and that would be consistent with the Secretary of Interior standards for treatment of historic properties. So that's expectation that right now we understand that there's some office, there's some vacancy, but as the market would allow for, then we would expect that to be turned over to residential, maybe just some other commercial that could be done there as well. So additional analysis would be required to determine the feasibility based on the proposed use. We do also have the implementation action that within the first year of adoption of the plan that we would explore the initiation of the California or National Register or local inventory as appropriate, determined by the Council for the Cannery and the Ash Office Building. So those are the two sites that have been identified previously as being eligible for historic designation. Just a little more about the plan and some building heights. So the allowable building heights are range from 2 to 5 stories. A little more height would be along El Camino Real as well as Park. And we do identify an affordable housing site across from the cannery. I guess it'd be Portage Avenue, the private drive just adjacent to the cannery. That would be a site that could also go up to 5 stories. We would expect a minimum of 15-foot ceiling heights for the ground floor and mixed-use buildings to allow for more commercial space and amenity space. And then that building height would expect to transition lower to lower density residential areas. Regarding environmental review, the adoption of the plan would require a supplemental EIR that tiers from the comprehensive plan EIR. Notice of preparation was released back in March. And so we are now looking at administrative draft internally, and we're ramping up to release a public draft sometime this summer for the required 45 days. So next steps here, this is kind of the last stop of the initial study sessions that we had planned. We were at the the PTC and the ARB last week. We'll follow up with them on some zoning components. We're here today with the HRB. The PTC is identified as a recommending body. So we're seeking feedback from the ARB and the HRB for the PTC to consider. So we're not expecting to come back necessarily to the HRB. Then we'll release the draft EIR for the public to review. And then we'll take all of this feedback in, develop a final NBCAP document and EIR, get a recommendation from the Planning Commission, and go to the council later this year for adoption. So one thing I do want to recognize is that while we do mention, and there's some guidelines and standards that are throughout this plan, I think that it does make sense that in Chapter 2, the vision, that we add a subsection about historic resources a little bit more than what we have, just to kind of set forth that context. We did mention a little bit of that in our staff report. So I think that'll make things make a little more sense of what we're trying to do regarding historic resources. So with that, we do seek your feedback on the draft plan as it relates to historic resources. That concludes my presentation. I'd be happy to answer any questions you have. There's no consultants here, just myself and Amy. Thank you.
So do we have any public comment on this item?
No comments.
Then I guess let's, do members of the board want to ask questions or? Yeah.
Good morning. I would like to know, have you superimposed the Sobrato project onto the NAVCAP, showing the housing that they're proposing versus the housing that you're recommending?
So I'm pretty familiar with that. I was actually a part of the city's negotiating team early on. So I did, when I was in those negotiations, I was thinking about the backdrop, the NVCAP, right? As much as we could try to bring some of those ideas forward. So I am familiar with their plan and the townhouses and the part of the development agreement to give the cities some land for open space and affordable housing. So yes.
Okay, but will your plan be updated to show those lines that are, the plans that are already in the pipeline?
I think the idea with the plan is that this is a community-based plan. And so we need to show what the preferred plan, what the council had endorsed. We understand there will be pipeline projects that come through or plans that come through even after the adoption of the plan. It's not the intent to, I think, update the document in that way.
Okay. Thank you.
All right, anybody else? All right, I have a question then. When I look at the, like, kind of the plan for the site, it looks like there's some like higher density or some modifications proposed to like the sides of the cannery building. Is that part of the adaptive reuse, or like, I mean, it seems odd to ask the question, like, what is the cannery building in this case? But like, it's sort of, where are the boundaries of the cannery building as far as the plan is concerned?
Right, thank you for that. So the preferred plan, I think that exhibit that you're looking at, it's illustrative. What this is showing is not the building being kind of preserved and maintained, because I think that the council's direction was to have an adaptive reuse. So we did have to show something that was a little bit different. We didn't have any specific submittal that would show something otherwise. It would, as I mentioned, it would need to be consistent with the Secretary of Interior standards. The intent is the footprint would be the same. I mean, I think looking at the character defining features, the walls and such would have to be the same. I think maybe the roof, other than like the monitor roofs, are probably not as defined. So maybe there'll be some possibilities for like sunroofs or something to get light in, right? If you do residential, you need more light. So I think the intent wasn't to expand the footprint at all.
Okay, thank you. And I guess comment wise, I do like that this plan includes listing of the structure. I know that's something we've talked about with the pipeline project as well. And so it's nice to see that incorporated as in kind of the outset of this plan. Do you have a question? Yeah.
Yeah, so I just wanted to try to better understand. So I think this is in our packet. This is the preferred plan, right? This is the one that we want to kind of mostly
Yes,
focus
that's
on.
correct.
And that's packet page 30, I guess, or packet page 55. So I mean, there's a lot of interesting notes on this about energy efficient buildings, green stormwater infrastructure, enhanced urban forest, celebrating history, community open space. So it looks like, because obviously we're really familiar with the Sobrato site, the cannery site, because that was just recently presented to us. And I'm trying to kind of recall the section of this preferred plan that was dedicated to that site. I guess it's not superimposed on here. So would other, I guess, portions of this preferred plan, some of it is already in place, like the Cloudera corner, right? The building there. But this whole residential area, it looks like that would eventually transition into something that is more in keeping with the overall master plan. Is that right?
Yeah, and I think just speaking to like the Cloudera site, and also there's a little kind of low scale building that's on a Sobrato property. It's like the Audi building, maybe that was mentioned previously here. One thing we're thinking about is that this does kind of represent that could be a reuse of those properties as well. Like there's a lot of push for commercial or office buildings to be converted into residential buildings. So I think this isn't intent to say like some things are going to stay or some things are going to change. It's very kind of fluid, but it's just an idea as people get their minds around what could be the case
I
10,
see.
20 years from now.
Okay. Got it. Okay. So, I mean, eventually there might be other applications that might come to maybe not the HRB, but to the city in terms of developers who, and now does Sobrato, I don't know, this might be a backwards question. Do they own that property? They just own the rights to develop that property? Do you know? I'm just out of curiosity.
So Sobrato owns about 15, 16 acres. So it includes the cannery, the big parking lot, actually the creek is a portion of that.
Mhm.
The building across the way, that's the Audi building. There's a little sliver that goes out from to Lambert, like as well. Yeah, so behind the cannery, where there was like a rail spur part of it. I think the part that's not is there's like a gym on Park,
right.
that little triangle. I think that's an
Right.
option for them to purchase.
I see. Okay, interesting.
I don't want to stray too far into that project, but just the background anyway.
And obviously they're aware of what the city's preferred plan is, and they're hopefully being respectful of that, right?
True, and I believe one of the people from Sobrato is on the working group. So yeah, they're familiar with this plan. I think they've been staying in touch with what's going on.
Okay.
Excuse me. What has the community feedback been? Has it been positive? I mean, what's the sentiment from those working groups or the meetings with the community?
So I wasn't involved with that aspect of the project, but what I can say is when we went forward to the council, as recently as last year, there was kind of a split. Some people wanted more units, some people wanted less units. They definitely didn't want office. So it's kind of all over the board. I think people couldn't really make everybody happy necessarily.
Right. And anything with respect to the historical resources that are in this area?
I can't recall that, but maybe Chitra, do you remember anything? Chitra's one of our staff. She's on the call here.
Hello, commissioners. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes.
We did have mixed feeling about the cannery building, but on the whole, people preferred to maintain the outward structure of the building and the adaptive reuse of the building. So that was the general feeling.
Okay, thank you.
Another question. On this, the ground floor egress plan, RPEC at page 63, I was just curious to know what's the difference between required, what is active edge? Like there's required retail edge on El Camino, so that would obviously be dedicated to retail space. Then there's along Oregon Expressway, there's required active edge, and along, it looks like Park, there might be encourage active edge. What is that? I just didn't know what that active word was implying when it comes to this plan.
Right. Thank you for that question. Yeah. So the active edge has to do with having more like pedestrian oriented types of uses on the ground floor. So it could be retail. There's a lot of different types of service oriented uses. It could even be in residential cases like amenity space, like they may have some recreation on that ground floor. So we recognize that along El Camino Real, it's probably more likely you're going to have spaces there. So we're seeing more requirement there. Other areas, we're kind of encouraging it.
Okay. Interesting.
So actually I have a question about this. I think my copy may have printed funny and the colors aren't easily discernible. Is the majority of it an encouraged active edge or a required active edge? Just curious.
Encouraged.
Encouraged. Okay. Yeah. I did have an additional question about the designation of the site. Has there been any discussion about whether the historic designation of the site would include the cannery building proper or also the Ash Street office building across the way?
Yeah, I think we're including both.
Okay.
To see.
I have a question on the Portage Avenue. Is it Woolworth? How do you pronounce that?
Thanks for asking, because a lot of people have been mispronouncing it. It's Boenerf.
Woolworth?
Boenerf. It's Dutch.
Okay. Well, the Dutch have so many different pronunciations, it's hard to tell. So do we have any example of that in Palo Alto now?
There's a Woonerf in at the library, the main library, Rinconada Library, that extends between the art center, kind of that parking lot over behind, between the community garden and the library. When that project came through, I remember that's what they called it.
Okay. Are we going to have a soft introduction into that, or will it just be, a free for all for everybody who hasn't been to Holland?
You mean an introduction to the community about the use of it?
Yes.
Well, I would imagine as development occurs and Woonerfs occur, that will be the opportunity to help educate people how to use it. Right. Okay.
Yeah, I think we're hoping that the design would kind of make people also learn how to use it as well.
But certainly I would encourage you to go visit the library, behind the library there, and see. It's a kind of a nice space. I don't know, what kind of studies there have been of how that space is used, whether, I'm imagining more use by pedestrians than vehicles.
What, if any, consideration or impact is coming from the Caltrain and the possible future high-speed rail situation that has been sort of discussed over the last couple of years? I was just curious because this property borderlines on the Caltrain track, so I just wanted to know if, I'm sure that was part of your study and your sort of environmental impact. I'm just curious to know if there's any interesting things about how the impact of this site, either to Caltrain or the Caltrain impact to the site, is, if any.
Yeah, CEQA would be the right tool for that, and noise would probably be it. I think it's definitely part of the evaluation. So there's nothing, I don't have anything yet to say about it, as we're still kind of in draft, but it definitely, it is something that we are looking at.
And also, I'm sure that a lot of the individual property owners, the residential property owners, that are highlighted in yellow. When they go to sell their property, is there, I'm just curious about the impact that they have in this and living in this environment of this, development around them. I guess it doesn't matter, but is there some kind of eminent domain or something that's happening, or do they?
No eminent domain. I mean, I think for those properties like on Pepper and Olive, for the most part, the plan does respect those to remain as is. There's not really a whole lot of change. So maybe at the peripheries, like as they abut the properties that are along El Camino Real, we're definitely sensitive to the transition of future buildings and height there. But everything else, I would say, would remain the same for them.
Okay.
Does anybody have any other questions or comments?
I just wanted to comment these packets are always so interesting. I wish I had more time. I was like, because I obviously read every page right before the meeting. No, but I always like during the meeting, I learned so much more about what's in the packet, or the packet has more meaning after the presentation. So I love some of these neat old photographs. Like, look at that one. Like, that's an aerial photograph of this. Like, what is this? This is just open land. But how long ago is that? No, I'm just saying I appreciate some of the information in these packets and the historic photos of, like, this one with the architect on the corner showing his. I was just saying I am appreciating some of the historic value that's in these packets. Thank you.
Additional comments?
Yeah. Well, I appreciate the fact that the designation for the cannery and the other building will be considered by Sobrato in the future for their inclusion in the registers for federal, state, and local. So it all seems to be in sync. So that's good.
So I don't know, at this point, do we need a motion, or, I mean?
No,
we-
No, it's a study session.
Yeah.
So, but this just, again, realizing that this is your opportunity, because the track for this is with the EIR and all that, is to
Mhm.
not come back to the HRB now. The EIR, I guess.
Yeah, the EIR is going to be published later this summer. I mean, I think anybody can certainly respond to that. And there may be opportunity when we go to the council, if any representative from the board may want to attend that meeting, for instance. That may be something that you work through maybe with.
I will certainly send you the link to the EIR once it's published. So as individuals, you can review that. We won't have a meeting about it to digest it, but if you have comments, those are welcome. And then in the next process after the draft EIR would be a final EIR, where comments that are made, questions that are asked, and any kind of correspondence would be addressed in the final EIR. So then that would be a way to see your comments addressed or questions answered as part of that process. And of course, as liaison to this board, I'm happy to keep you abreast of when it's going to various commissions, like Planning Commission, which would happen with an EIR for their recommendation to council on the plan, so that we can also have an opportunity for the representation from the HRB at the Planning and Transportation Commission as well.
Okay. Sounds good. And so are we okay to move on without a motion, and everybody all right with that? Okay.
Thank you for your
Great.
time.
Thank you. Thank you. So should we move on to the approval of minutes, or is there other? Okay.
No other items.
The approval of the minutes for the May 11th meeting. Does anybody have comments, changes, anything like that? Nope. Okay. Then motion, somebody want to make a motion?
I will move to approve the draft minutes dated May 11th, 2023. Is there a second?
I second.
And can we approve by, do we need to roll call or can we voice vote?
I need to abstain because I was not present at the meeting.
Oh, so we don't have a
Ooh.
quorum on this.
Oh, yeah.
So we will, can we defer this to the next meeting?
Yes.
Okay, let's do that.
And on that, the next meeting is, I guess we can move to announcements and of future meetings and
Yes.
such. So June 22nd is our next meeting. And that would be a time to approve these minutes as well. I have a report that I'm preparing regarding the review bulletin, so we can have a full discussion about the current permit processes related to historic resources, just kind of a baseline understanding and discussion. Then when we talk about our retreat topics, in fact, we could even put that on the agenda, discussion of potential retreat topics. And we're looking toward a Friday evening as opposed to a Saturday for the convenience of many folks, including recordation of the meeting and participation by all on the board as well as staff. So hopefully a Friday night, and I think the target date is July
The 28th. Yeah.
So maybe those in the chambers now can let us know, or I know we're doing a doodle poll to see, and I don't know where we stand with that, if we have responses, but I've responded. If you want to tell us now in the meeting.
Oh, great.
Okay, yay. So that's, I don't know, Margaret, if you want some time to consider that, or,
I'm just studying my calendar.
Yeah.
I might, it looks like I could probably be there.
so at least we have all of us here.
Mhm.
And we'll just continue to look to the remaining board members. Yeah. And we'll let you know about that. Another thing is if that does go through and it all works for us, then, the day before is a regular meeting date, we would cancel that. So because we don't need 2 meetings 2 days in a row. And then for July 13th, we've got our chair is missing for her planned absence. And so we can kind of gauge it, but that's another opportunity to consider a summer break. If those in the chambers are so interested in scheduling their summer vacations, let me know if that seems like a good meeting to vacate. Okay, thanks.
Yeah, and I think agendizing the discussion of retreat topics sounds like, sounds great. Yeah,
Let's do
for
that.
next meeting.
So we can have all that momentum building towards that retreat where we will feel the luxury of time and no one has to rush off to work.
Yeah.
It's a little different thing when you have to rush off to the movie theater or something. It's not quite as pressing. Thank you.
Did you have?
Oh, I was just going to say something unrelated to the schedule.
Oh, okay. So we all set with the schedule at this point? Yeah. Okay, great. Yeah.
Oh, so I was over on California Avenue yesterday, and they're painting these murals in the middle of the street intersections. It's kind of neat. I mean, they're actively painting them one of them this week, and I think there's going to be a sort of a dedication on Friday, late evening, Friday night. But this Woonerf, I think that's what's happening on California Avenue. And where there's no parking on the streets. It's more dining and open public use. And so in the intersections, they painted this one big street mural. It's semi-permanent. Like it'll eventually wear off as people walk over it, but it's worth, this whole thing that we were talking about reminded me that that's happening right now on California Avenue. It's quite interesting.
I think there are opportunities to provide feedback on the user experience there. So yeah, if you have the time to take a look, I'm sure there's a QR code or something that you can get your phone out and provide comments to the group that's studying that whole thing. Yeah.
Okay. And then there's going to be another past tour this Saturday of the Burge Clark buildings on Stanford campus.
Oh,
And it'll be led by Bo Crane again.
okay.
So, and that's at 10 o'clock. And I forget what the meeting site is, but it's on their website.
Great. Anything else? Any more comments or announcements for future meetings or anything? I think we're all set. Is there movement to adjourn? Can I do that, or somebody else has to? Okay, so I move to adjourn.
I second.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
All right, thank you.